Hi, everyone. I'm Fran Simon. I'm the host of Abstraction Distraction, illuminating conversations with abstract artists. And I'm here today with my friend Martina Sestakova, who's a watercolorist and textile designer and art educator here in Kensington, Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C. So hi, Martina. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Fran. Thank you so much for having me. Nice to be here.
I'm so excited that you agreed to do this inaugural episode. It's my first foray into podcasting, and I can't think of a better person to interview. So thanks so much. So Martina, over time, we got to know one another. Just for the audience sake, I'll just describe how we got to know one another. I was struggling to paint with Yupo paper. And I saw lots of artists doing lots of things with Yupo, but that wasn't what I wanted to do. And as I perused around looking for people to emulate, I found Martina's work and I was just blown away. I love it.
Thank you.
So, yes, I do. And so I reached out to Martina and I asked if she does. I saw that she did lessons on her website, but I didn't see anything about Yupo. So she kindly agreed to provide me with some lessons. And while I'm nowhere close to being able to replicate or even get close to what Martina is doing, I got the joy of getting to know her, and it's just been amazing. So I just wanted everyone to have a little background on how we got to know one another. So Martina, you have such an interesting story, such a great background. Can you talk a little about your journey to becoming an artist?
Sure. It's an interesting journey. I'm originally from Prague in the Czech Republic, and I have moved to the United States about 20 years ago. But when it comes to art, I feel like it has been kind of in my life in these really indirect ways. There's no one in my family who I have ever seen paint or do anything like, pottery. I am from a family of farmers and gardeners and cooks and bakers. So I have been always surrounded by some kind of a, curiosity, just how can I do this? Let's test out new ideas. But in terms of kind of art and museums, yes, I grew up in Prague, and you have amazing architecture everywhere you look, so there's definitely that. But I actually, after maybe 15 years in the United States, I decided to go back to graduate school, and I ended up picking fashion design of all things. And that's where really the first kind of like the concentrated interest in art really came together. We had to, design our collections, and that's when I started working with markers and colored pencils and watercolors. So the graduate school kind of became the actual driver of me being interested in art history and starting to practice my own work. So that's a little bit about the journey.
Yes, over the course of your history, you held some really interesting jobs. Can you talk a little bit about jobs?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, back in Prague, I had like a little internship at a bank, and then in the US, I came over as an au pair. So, it was a job and very wonderful experiences with two families. And then I ended up getting a degree in communication and worked in clinical trials and drug research for 9 years. So there was a really interesting kind of field. I really enjoyed it. I have worked with, I worked with people from all over the world. And that's maybe partly where kind of my interest in stories and really what communication means maybe started. No matter what you do in your life, I feel like a year later you're like, oh, that totally made sense, even when it didn't make sense before. So now in my daily practice, my grandmother's baking skills come together with my clinical research. It's like all sits in you and it fills up your heart, and then suddenly it just comes out. So I did really enjoy working in the clinical trials, but maybe year 7, 8, 9, I was really into what can I do that's something new, and that's when I ended up going back to graduate school and getting a degree in a really unrelated field. But I am pretty much daily using my skills from all of the jobs I have had.
Isn't that interesting how you
Yeah,
have had an interesting trajectory myself? And I do reflect often that I use all the skills I got those other parts of my life. It's so
absolutely.
interesting. Yeah. So you mentioned literature, communication, and the tie-in to your art. Can you talk about literature in your art and a little bit how that comes together for you?
Absolutely. So I am I'm really interested in words and language and how we talk to each other and how we talk to ourselves, kind of the inner self-talk. And I love reading, so I do expose myself to a lot of books and poetry, and I listen. And I am just really intrigued with how we as humans use language to convey ideas and these meanings of words, and how every word that we say or someone says to us actually carries this really interesting emotional story with it. So in my own practice, what I do, this is totally like an outcome of the clinical trial background, very systematic and detail oriented. I will take a book, I read a book, and if there's a word or a little phrase that interests me or moves me in some way, I write it down. So I am very systematic about always writing down these words, and I have lists of them. And then sometimes they sit in these lists for weeks, sometimes days, sometimes years. And when I go to paint, what I do is that I go back to this list, I pick the word, or I pick, a little line out of a poem, and that becomes the title of my work. So I always have a title of a painting before the painting exists. And I'm really interested in sitting down in my studio, reading the words aloud. For instance, the one you're sharing right now is called High in the Clean Blue Air. And this line is taken out of a poem by Mary Oliver. She's definitely my favorite poet. So what I do is I read a poem, I write down these words, and when I sit down in my studio, I kind of consider the painting process to be both meditative and healing, but also like an interesting opportunity for connection. I close my eyes, I think about the words, how they feel in my body, where they are, how I process them, and then I kind of capture them in 3 different ways. I think about the color of the word, I think about the shapes that the word kind of calls for, and then I'm definitely interested in the overall energy and a sense of movement of it. So there's a little bit of a technical approach to each painting, but it's mostly this, healing, meditative experience that the words create. And then the last part of kind of the process is that then I write a story about the words. So, it starts as a story created by someone else, like a poem. I kind of take the words out of this poem. I explore them visually in my painting, but then when I share the paintings, for instance, on Facebook or on Instagram, I go back in and I add a story of my own. It's kind of constant words, and it's sharing and these opportunities for connection. So it's kind of like a full circle for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of the experience of working with language as a source of inspiration.
Right. You once said to me that you were a minimalist, but if you look at your work, it doesn't look minimal at all. Can you talk about minimalism and in your life? I
Yes,
understand the viewer. I think it would be interesting.
oh, interesting. That makes me smile. I would definitely think that I'm a minimalist kind of when it comes to possessions. I have one pair of shorts and I have like 2 t-shirts. I have very few things. I tend to wear a lot of black, which is weirdly also kind of possibly this minimalist idea. But then when I design, and sometimes I have to laugh about it kind of myself, is when I paint and when I design my scarves that you are sharing right now, I'm definitely sometimes like, wow, where did this come from? You know, because again, like this family of farmers and centuries of working in the fields, like, you know, all of this kind of heritage is inside of me. And my new exploration of the world is just this crazy explosion of colors. But I think it honors, hopefully it honors the richness of my inner life, because I have so many colors to offer, but it's also honoring, hopefully, the language, you know, because I do feel like language is very, very powerful and colorful and vibrant, and it can be joyous. So
Right.
yes, minimalism maybe in my house and minimalism in my closet, but when it comes to the colors in the paintings and in the scarves, yes, no holding back there.
Exactly. I think you have two paintbrushes now, right?
Oh
You
yeah,
had
that's right.
one. And get
Yeah,
another paintbrush.
that's right. When you met me, I had one brush. Yeah, I
I
like
love that.
art supplies, but sometimes I'm like, ooh, too many. But yes, I do have a few brushes now, and I did buy. Sorry, I looked away. I was looking at my supplies. I did buy a bunch of new paints, so I'm learning to expand and bring more things into my life, because then I can create more.
I can't wait till you come to my studio and I show you what I have.
I
And
would
you'll
visit. Yeah, I would
your
love to.
studio is neat and organized and mine is so random. So it's so funny. Um, so you're really active in the DC arts community. Does that come naturally to you? Or do you consider yourself an extrovert or
Ah,
tell me more about
interesting. I am very active. Interesting question. I I mean, I can go for days without talking to anyone and being by myself. I'm very content in the studio and in my own home and in my own life, being by myself. I'm one of the people who never gets bored. So, you know, give me a free day and I will wake up and I'll do something throughout the whole day. But when it comes to kind of engaging with the art community and with my clients, I genuinely like being with people, and I really, and I think this is linked to my interest in language as an opportunity for connection. I just like meeting new people. I like going to art fairs. I like, you know, having pieces out on display, meeting the customers. um, I enjoy teaching. You know, I do a lot of the Zoom workshops these days, and I like the community, and I like how, you know, if you put yourself out there, it's just always an opportunity for connection. So does it come naturally? Not always. Totally fine if I don't have to talk to anyone, but if I, you know, again, if I have the opportunity for connection, I will definitely pursue it and have fun with it.
you're always so gracious to other people. I've noticed that about you. And one of the things
Thank you.
that really strikes me is your work with seniors. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I have been teaching at retirement communities for maybe 4 or 5 years now. It actually started as a random opportunity at an art fair. There was a retirement community had a stand, they had a booth, you know, across from me at an art festival, and we started talking. And I ended up going in there, and then suddenly I taught at all of these different places. So I think this goes back to the medical background and the clinical trials. I am interested, one, in language in my own life and in my own practice, but when it comes to kind of working with other people, I'm quite interested in how we age and how we process things as the body ages, as the brain ages, and how we really kind of handle curiosity around about it. I have worked with people, living in independent living. I worked with people who needed nursing support. So there's a whole level of support, they need. But one of the kind of, I guess, the connection or kind of what links all of these people is they are curious. They're curious about what they can do with the brush. They're curious about art. They like art history, and they really want to create something of their own. So yes, I have worked with people who, let's say, are in their late 80s and late 90s. My oldest, I just had my second 99-year-old working with me, which, it's all just always so fun. You have a lady who's 99 and she just like strolls into a room, creates amazing artwork, and there I am like, ooh, I want to be you. So,
yes.
I have, it's one thing, like I love that I have the opportunity to bring all of this cool stuff and the projects and the painting to these communities. But to tell the truth, I feel like I learn more from them than they from me. A 99-year-old could like seriously teach me something about life. So I'm going to go for it and learn from her.
Excellent. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, Martina, one thing I wanted to ask you specifically about your work, and I'm just going to go back to some of your pieces,
Sure.
because I want to talk about how hard it is to control UPO, and yet, here's a good example. You are able to use your hand, use control, and control the media, and at the same time allow the paint to do, take your hand out of it and let it do what it's supposed to do on its own. And I find that really interesting. Can you talk, expand on that a little bit?
Sure. So the UPO is a plastic medium. It's a man-made medium. It has no trees. It's kind of labeled a paper, but it's recyclable, and I kind of compare it to like painting on a kitchen counter. You're really working on this surface where the paper is supporting you, but then you have a layer of water and you start putting in all of these paints. And what you just said, I love both the opportunity to control the shape of the brushstroke, but I also enjoy that when I put the pigment in, that there is a little bit of it's just gonna do what it wants to do. So I like kind of the maybe balance and not balance of it at times. But I tend to paint on UPO first with just a little bit of water. And the water acts a little bit like a raindrop. When a raindrop falls on a surface, it doesn't go flat. It will keep its shape. So I am working definitely with, water can hold its own shape. And then I start kind of, putting the paints in. And so for instance, in this example, you're seeing a lot of color, but it all started as these really brushstrokes just filled with water, and then me going in and kind of honoring the shape that the water wants to keep. Sometimes, I'll put a brushstroke down of water, I put paint into it, and I don't necessarily like what it looks like, so I will disrupt it and start moving it around. But I think you actually, the way you described it earlier, I think you captured it. It's this interesting interplay of I don't know if control is the right word, but it's this interplay of having a sense where something may go, and then really having this kind of stepping back and having a little bit of a sense of awe of, oh, this can also happen, and I didn't necessarily do it. But I feel like the way I paint is how I try to think about language, that I have control over to what I say to other people, and I also have control over to what I want to say to myself in my own head. The quality of my own thoughts about the world and the quality of my thoughts about myself. And then the colors are kind of these nuances. It could be the tone of the language. I'm getting a little too maybe
No, I
spiritual,
get it.
you know, but it's, I do find a connection between, you know, for instance, the title here, we mentioned it earlier, is High in the Clean Blue Air. I think the words have shapes. In my own head, when I close my eyes, air, height, cleanliness, blue, all of these elements of the title do hold a certain shape. You know, as abstract as I can kind of keep it. So, you know, you're going to see some paintings where I have really quick brushstrokes, some that where the brushstroke is so big that it has this weight to it. So I think, you know, there's definitely a correlation between how I paint, the physical experience of the painting, and kind of the essence of the words that I'm trying to capture, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yes. You know, I don't know how many viewers out there have ever tried to use Yubo, but it is a very challenging medium, and you have really mastered it in such an amazing way. I mean, I'm here looking at I look at your paintings all the time, but you know,
Yeah.
just really seeing them.
Well, one thing I think that helps me in the practice is Yupo is tricky in that you could just play forever, right? You just introduce water, you introduce pigment, it dries, you can introduce water and it you know, gets wet again, and you just can. So I find Yupo non-threatening in that I know when to stop. I think it gets really tricky when you work in a medium and you are not sure when your work is done, because this medium doesn't tell you you're done. It's endlessly available, right? The surface can always be evoken, and I have a very clear sense of I'm done. So I think I'm kind of able to hopefully handle the watercolors and the shapes and the energy in a way that it's concise and it's done.
Right. It's really masterful, as I said before. I mean, I can't really
Oh,
come up
yeah.
with it.
Very kind. Yeah. Thank you.
Can
Thank
you
you.
talk about how you use technology to create your scarves?
Sure. So you know, the scarves here, you can see them on the screen. You can also see them behind me in my studio. The scarves are, I wouldn't say an extension. They actually started before kind of the painting. You know, what came first, chicken or egg, scarves or paintings? What I do is that I transform some of my paintings or some of my photographs into digitized patterns. So I do photograph all of my artwork, and sometimes there's a part of the artwork that reminds me of something else, and I kind of feel like, oh, this could become a pattern. So the textiles are definitely, you know, they start with my artwork, but I do adjust them digitally pretty heavily. I just had a studio visit a few days ago, and a lady was asking about one particular design, and she's like, "Oh, how did you do this?" And I'm like, "This is like the 25th option I came across in my working. I really don't know. I can show you the starting picture, but like you almost cannot see the connection." So, you know, it is painting, it's photograph, it gets digitized, and then I build the pattern. But I definitely allow myself to just kind of keep going with it, where, you know, wherever it needs to go. A lot of the scarves, so they all have names and they all come with stories. Again, it kind of goes back to this love for words and my love for writing and storytelling. But most of the work that you're looking at here on the screen it all started, or most of it started, me reacting to a moment in my life or in somebody else's life. So the scarves can, you know, tell their own stories. I have a scarf that I called Step by Step that I designed after a friend lost a job, and she dealt with it in such a way where I'm like, I'm really seeing your courage, and I'm seeing your ability to honor that life keeps going. So, you know, I react to what other people are going through. The scarf you are wearing right now is called In Bloom. And it actually was inspired by my grandmother's garden in the Czech Republic. So the textile designs kind of happen when they happen. And they're definitely reactions to a variety of life experiences. And like the artwork, they're meant to be healing, and they're meant to be kind of aside from a fashion accessory, they are meant to be a reminder of something that's important to the person wearing them. So
Right.
that's a little bit about the textiles. Yeah.
My husband looked at this. My husband looked at this piece in front of us and said, "That looks like a garden."
Uh-huh.
So I thought that was, yeah.
Yeah,
So just thought I'd tell you to share.
that's
So,
great. Yeah, I
oh,
really like that. That I can create something. I have an inner experience with it, and then I can release it to the world. And then you or your husband look at it, and that you see your own interpretation. Which I think is quite fascinating. So yeah, wonderful, wonderful.
yes. Well, Martina, thank you so much for being here with us today. Really appreciate you spending the time Sunday evening, and you have
Of course.
better things to do, but I really appreciate it. I hope all of you will look for Martina at her website at Rados. Oh, Rados means joy in Czech, by the way.
That's
Rados
right.
by Martina Sestakova.com. And joy it is. It is a joy to talk with you and know you. So, so joy, yes. And you can reach our Rados by Martina Sestakova.com. And look for her on Instagram, Facebook, all over social media, and you'll be honored to see her artwork as well. So, and sign up for her newsletter too.
Yay.
So yes, definitely. Thanks for joining us, everyone. This is Abstraction Distraction. I hope you'll subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for upcoming episodes. Thank you again. And Martina, I hope you have a great day. And thanks again. Looking forward to having you come over and see my studio.
Yes, yes, yes. Let's coordinate. Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations on your podcast. This is quite exciting. So take care.
Great. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Okay.